Happy October, everybody. Guys, there has been so much weirdness going on today, building up to this point. It's October 1, time for the first reading from October Nights, 31 Tales for the Halloween Season, written by this guy, Kevin Lake. It's like, for the last few hours, it's really strange. It clouded up, it got dark, started hearing what you just heard, mysterious creatures screaming from the forest. I've been hearing what sounds like wailing, very definitive tree knocks. It's as if everyone or everything is saying, give us our story. Okay, so we set the tent up, we got us a campfire going, we've broken out the flannel, fall is here, October is here. And so this story, this first story that I'm going to read in this massive, meaty and potatoey, this is the longest thing I've ever written. Before this, Isle of Capri was my longest work. It's 87,000 words. This one, first draft was over 100,000. After we went through several drafts, we cut it down to about 92,000 words. So it's still longer than Isle of Capri. I want to say two things here. Number one, thank you, my YouTube viewers, my subscribers, the people that come by occasionally and watch a video or so, for inspiring me to finish this project that was 7 years in the making. Some of the stories I've written throughout the years, saved them in Word documents. Some I wrote in my head, but didn't take the time to actually type them out because I just didn't have a market. But our audience here on YouTube has become that market. Literally, since we started publishing the Bigfoot Sasquatch Files series this summer, I think in June, about 4 months ago, thousands of you monthly have been buying my books, and I can't thank you enough. You don't know how grateful my family and I are to you for doing that. And for those of you who don't have the extra money and don't buy the books, we appreciate you too. You don't know how grateful we are that you come here, you take time out of your days to watch these videos. You know, for a lot of folks, time is really all they have because times are hard financially, especially with COVID-19 going on. So I'm going to read as many of these stories as I can for you this month, because if you can't afford the book, I still want you to hear the stories, okay? Because you're why this happened, okay? You hear that? You hear that tree knock? They're like, get on with it. Okay, and number two, I want to give you a little, this is going to take me about 20 minutes to read this story. And we're already 3 minutes into the video, so it's going to be kind of a long one. There's about 6 of these stories. There's 31 stories. There's one for every night of October. About 6 of them I've already told on this channel, and this first one is one of them that I told in rough format, and here's why. I told it this summer. I'd made my way through the first draft of this monster book, and I knew I had about 90 days to go to be able to go through the second draft, third draft, fourth. I go through 5 drafts before I turn anything over to my editor, because I want to make sure that the story says what I meant it to say, not what my editor thought I meant it to say. Big difference. It can change the entire story. It's all hard work. It takes forever, but the meticulousness of it starts when you start going through that second draft, third. Oh my gosh. My right eye developed a twitch from staring at the computer screen so much that, and it just stopped twitching about a week ago. And I finished this thing up about a month ago. So, and somebody, one of our followers, and I thank you for this, recommended I get these reading glasses that have that blue screen blockage. That's helped a lot. But my point is this. Here's how it works. I think for most artists, not just me, but whether you're a writer, you're a singer, or a musician, when you're creating your art, your craft, when you're going through it the first time, you're like, this is great. Everybody's going to love this. But then you go out later, you start picking it apart, and it's like, man, this crap is garbage. Nobody's going to read this. It would be criminal for me to charge people money for this. I mean, the self-doubt just comes in. And that was the case this summer when I started going through the second draft of this first story, a story called No Vacancy. And I thought, well, take it to the people and see what they think. So I came up here and I made a video, and it was titled something to the effect of 2 sightings in one day and the second will blow your mind, okay? and people, why do you title your videos? Because that's how it works in social media. Okay. You're not going to watch the video unless it's titled a certain way. And it's completely different in literature. It's a back and forth game. The formats, the platforms, you've got to really understand what you're doing to be able to succeed in either. And to do it in both is kind of rare. But, I came up here after I went through the second draft of this story and made some changes, some edits, told the story because I wanted to see what you folks thought. And you loved it. You absolutely loved it. And one person even commented, they said, wow, you were in rare form today. That was an amazing story. That was the nudge I needed to finish this beast of a book, okay? And get this thing done. So 20-some minute story is going to take me to read it, and here I've been yapping my jaws for 6 minutes already, but that's what I do, right? I just wanted to kind of give you, I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to kind of give you some behind the scenes, you know, of how this thing works. And I brought water with me. I might have to stop and take a water break from time to time. So, I'll do my first one now, and then we're going to get right into the story, okay? So, I just heard the first tree frog in the night. Now, there might be a bad word or two in here, but I'll switch it on the fly because we do intentionally keep our channel PG rated. And that's why I can't read all these stories. There's some in here. This is for grown-ups. I mean, there's some stories in here with adult themes, adult language, adult situations, and I'm not going to read those on YouTube. On those days, we'll probably just go into the forest here behind my home where maybe, yeah, potentially, there's Bigfoot Sasquatch back there. All right. So, it's getting grandpa mode here. That's what my wife and kid tells me every time they see me reading. They're like, you look like a grandpa. All right. Okay. No Vacancy. The story's called No Vacancy. It's been nearly 20 years to the month, if not to the day. I remember explicitly that it was October. The leaves were majestic in their full autumn color. The air was crisp. Not cold, mind you, just crisp. Perhaps a feeling that must be felt in order to be understood. And it simply felt like a great day to be alive. It all brought about a certain feeling of nostalgia that comes around this time each year. And I found myself trying to figure out just where in the heck all the time between back when I'd be racing home from school to put on my costume, no doubt just one of many plastic cheapos from a local department store that you wore over your clothes that I'd donned throughout the years of my childhood, and now had gone. Here I was, walking down the streets again, door to door, but it was a different town, different streets, with a different costume and all for a different purpose. No, I wasn't looking for candy, I was looking for money. And the more the better, because the more I found, the more I'd get paid. No, I wasn't a door-to-door thief, I was a door-to-door salesman, pitching stocks, bonds, and mutual funds for a sizable Wall Street firm where I'd spend the next 6 years of my life before going into private practice for 2 years, after which I'd finally accept the fact that the gig just wasn't for me. Sure, I was okay at it and I got the bills paid, but I simply had absolutely no passion for what I did the whole time I was doing it. I wish I'd left the business sooner, but hey, at least I finally got out. I'd driven out into the country, the next county over actually, from the city in which I had my office to go prospecting. Door to door, 25 contacts a day. I'd grown up in the country, and I just seemed to do better with my fellow country people. I lived and worked in a university town, and there were quite a few intellectual elitist types who loved to pounce at my Appalachian American accent and ask, "Are you from Kentucky?" with a look on their face similar to one you might wear if you realize you've just stepped in dog crap. I just changed that word. No, I'd say, wondering what where I was from had to do with what I was doing. I'm from West Virginia. Oh, they'd then say. Same thing. They'd take quite a dramatic pause at this juncture while they were looking down, as if in deep thought, trying to recall something they'd forgotten. "I can't be bothered," they'd say, and then they'd shut the door in my face. I never experienced this out in the country, and people seemed to give me a little more time to say who I was and what I was doing, and more than just a few of them would actually invest their money with me. It took me a while to realize, but most of the country folks I deal with actually appreciated seeing a hardworking young man out there beating the bushes, trying to drum up business, and they'd give me $10,000 or $20,000 to invest in a safe, tax-free bond to reward my efforts, and because they liked me. And in time, many of these folks would end up investing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with me. Most of these folks out in the country lived in tiny little brick ranchers, like I'd grown up in. They drove 20-year-old vehicles that still looked like they'd just been driven right off the lot, like my family had always driven, and they never allowed the results of the efforts of their labors to lead them to think they were any better than anyone else. They were not materialistic, and by making sure to spend less than they earned over time, many of them became millionaires, even though their incomes had never really been that high. By the time I was up and running with a successful business, I realized all those highfalutin yuppie types who were too hung up on where I was from because of my accent didn't have any dang money to invest anyway, and they wanted to simply strike first with some sort of demeaning insult as a way to hide that fact. On this beautiful October day, I'd parked in the lot of what appeared to be an old abandoned motel, the kind that was probably booming with business back in the 1940s through the 1950s, but then started dying and eventually went by the wayside due to the interstate highway system that was built on the other side of the mountain. This place might have made it to the early 80s, but I'm sure by then it was done for, as was the rest of this little village of a town, due to all the box stores that started going up and down the interstate by then. The only thing left around here now is a dusty old grocery store, one overpriced gas station, this abandoned motel, and a bunch of self-made millionaires with blue hair and gray hair, the very people I'd come out to meet face to face, one door-to-door adventure at a time. But I would have rather been a kid again, trick-or-treating. I got out of my car and locked it, and as I pulled on the handle on the door to make sure it was locked, not that it really needed to be in this area, I noticed that the old sign for the motel was on. It was flickering. The no portion of the no vacancy, the vacancy part was completely out, as was every other thing of electrical integrity around me, but the no just kept flickering, very much like one of those neon bug catcher light thingamadoodles you see on people's porches in the summer. This intrigued me, and I half thought I was seeing things. Maybe just the sun glaring off the old curved blown glass, as it was getting to be about noon. Curious, I walked over and stood under the sign, and sure enough, the dang thing was blinking in and out, not at a consistent but at a rather random cadence. I looked through the windows of the door, barely able to see through all the dust that was probably nearly as old as I was, and I saw an old man sitting behind the counter reading a newspaper. Oh, how I'm dating myself with this story. Okay, kids, newspapers were where people used to be told what to think by the media back in the days before the internet. There were these huge pieces of paper with stories that may or may not have even been true printed in them, and the back pages were mostly filled with advertisements from the companies who paid advertisement fees so the newspapers could be printed. All this media stuff is printed online now. Heck, you're probably reading this book in e-format, so that doesn't need to be explained. But way back in the old days, at the turn of the current century, things were different. Instinctively, I reached down and grabbed the doorknob and twisted it. It was unlocked, so I opened it and I walked right in. It was always my goal to make 25 contacts a day while out cold calling, and if nothing else, at least I'd be getting the first one out of the way, right here at the parking lot where I was leaving my car. "Morning," I said as I walked in. "How you doing today?" "Morning was hours ago," the apparently grumpy old man said. He looked like he was 90 if he was a day old. "What do you want?" It's starting to rain, but only right here. And there was no rain in the forecast today, but we must read on. This place is weird. "I just wanted to come by and introduce myself," I said. I told him my name and that I'd recently opened up a new investment office in the next town over, and that I had some really good paying, tax-free, insured municipal bonds and yada, yada, yada. Just stop, he said, as I was about halfway through my spiel of explaining why muni bonds were so much better for high net worth retirees than bank certificates of deposits, CDs. And every part of it was true, still is. I'll never understand why anyone would ever put money into a bank CD other than for a short-term goal. Like if you know you want to take a vacation next year and you have the money now, put it in a one-year CD. But I was always meeting so many retirees who had money they knew they never needed to use, and they'd roll it over in one-year bank CDs at next to nothing percent over and over and over. For the life of me, I never understood why they just couldn't comprehend putting it in longer-term insured tax-free bonds that paid literally 5 times as much interest. But hey, their lack of knowledge was my job security for me, and it was my job to make them aware. "You're not getting any of my money," he said, very gruff. And I'll point out here that not even for an instant the entire time I was in his office did he ever look up from that paper, not once. "Sir," I said, my canned response for rejection already on the way out of my mouth, "I understand that you feel safe with the bank because you can walk in any time, but our firm's been around for more than 100 years, yada, 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 yada," I continued. "Go on now," he said, flipping to the next page. "Get on down the road. We ain't got no vacancies." "I bet," I said, a light chuckle following. "How long's it been since you've let a room in this place?" "You take care now," he said, completely refusing to dignify my question with an answer. "Get to getting." I saw that I was getting nowhere, and I wasn't about to waste my time. Something a guy who trained me a little when I just started selling investments told me, and it was something that I'd learned to be true, was that once they're over 80, don't spin your wheels trying to get their money. "These people don't even buy green bananas at the grocery store," he'd said. "It'll just break your heart knowing they've got more than $1 million sitting in the bank doing nothing for them, but they don't make changes at that age." I left the man to his paper, and I made sure to pull the door shut on my way out. I looked up at the no vacancy sign on my way out, and it had stopped glitching. Strange, I thought to myself. Kind of how it stopped raining and now the skies blue above me. Strange. Strange, I thought to myself, how the old thing had even glitched in the first place. I guarantee you that sign was older than me, and it didn't even seem like the place was still wired for electricity. It wasn't warm enough for a fan or air conditioning to be on inside, and there hadn't been, and it was a pretty bright day without a cloud in the sky, so there was no need for the man to have any lights on inside, but it just seemed strange. No humming from a refrigerator that might be back in the office, no clickety-clacking from the ice machine, not even a lamp turned on in the corner for ambiance. "You got out of there just in time," a voice came from the house across the road from the motel. I looked over and there was a man in his early 50s standing on his porch. "I was just about to call the law on you, and if you come over here a trespassing, I still will." Geesh, I thought. Maybe I would have been better off in the college town today. 2 jerks in a row? I kept going and started knocking on more doors. There was more walking out here in the country than back in town, as the houses were farther apart, but at least the people were friendlier. Usually. I eventually knocked on the door of a little old lady who appeared to be about 80, so I was very polite with her and not pushy because of that whole "we don't even buy green bananas" deal, and then I went on my way. She had been my 25th contact for the day, so my day was now done. The next morning, I was sitting in my office when the little old lady I'd met the day before, and who was in her 80s, I would indeed find out when I opened her account, pulled up, riding shotgun with her husband, who was driving their beast of an old Ponderosa red Cadillac that looked brand new, though I knew it was probably more than 20 years old. "Can we come in?" she asked when she walked in the door. "Absolutely," I said, shocked that she'd stopped by. "Now write him a check, dear," she said to her husband as soon as they walked into my office and sat. I hadn't even pitched them a product. The old man took out his checkbook and wrote a check for $50,000. "Put that in something tax-free." Dang, bad word it. He was gruff. He said, nearly as gruff as the old man I'd met the day before. "I don't care as long as it's triple B rated or higher." The man knew about bond ratings, which was done to measure their safety, but it was no big surprise. Anyone who can simply pull out a checkbook out of their pocket and write a check for 50 grand usually knows quite a bit about money. I spent time with the couple and I found out that the man, again to no surprise, knew far more about money than me. Sure, I'd been college educated and trained by arguably the best investment firm in the world, but I still barely met my monthly obligations, and it seemed far too often that I had to buy groceries on credit cards. It would take another 20 years before I'd realize, hey, welcome to life in your 20s. Too bad I was in my 40s before I finally started cutting myself some slack for so many ways in which I lived during my 20s. As I continued talking with the couple, I learned that the old man had been born the youngest of 11 children, quit school just in time to be drafted and sent off to fight in the Second World War, came home injured and half crazy, and then went on to amass millions by buying a ton of real estate in the right place at the right time. So do you guys know that old guy at that old rundown motel down the road from you guys? I asked them when our business was done. I was hoping to get a referral. Hey, if these octogenarians were willing to toss me some of their green banana money, maybe they could convince the old codger to do the same if they knew him. You mean old Harvey, the old man said, that owned the old motel there at the Crossroads? Yeah, I said. I didn't get his name when I stopped in yesterday, but I assume that's him. Oh dear, the old lady said. You didn't meet Harvey if you were there yesterday. Sure I did, I said. I noticed he was in his office, so I popped in. He ran me out about as quick as I entered. That old B-word has been dead for 3 years, the old man said. That dang motel's been an eyesore for 30 years, ever since it shut down. You're kidding, I said, incredulous. I knew what I'd seen the day before. I knew who I'd talked to. We'd have had the dang interstate if it weren't for him, the old man said. They came through there, old Eisenhower's boys back in the 50s, trying to buy everyone out. He wouldn't sell. Lost 2 of his baby brothers in the war, and he said the GD government had got enough from him and they weren't getting his land. What about eminent domain, I asked, the government's power play by where they take holder outer's land for a fraction of its fair market value when they refuse to sell? Oh, they threatened him with it, the old man said, but he dug in deeper and said they weren't getting nothing of his. No one was. Heck, he had offers to sell the motel even after business all but died completely, and he just held out. Sat in there, all the rooms empty, reading the papers and the hunting magazines. Wow, I said. I could think of no other word more appropriate for this new information, so I said it again. Wow. Didn't think the old B word was ever going to die, the old man said. You know the saying, only the good die young. They ought to add to it that curmudgeonly old, bad word, lives forever. Now, dear, his wife said, slapping him on the arm, stop saying all those bad words. Hey, he said, starting to rise, I'm glad of it. That just means I'll live forever too. I laughed at that. He didn't. And he rose and they walked out the door together. I laughed at that and I rose with him and walked them out together. The old man would later tell me when he stopped by once, alone, a couple years later, after his wife had passed, that the reason he came in that day and brought me $50,000 was because his wife had approached him crying the day I'd met her at the door. She'd told him that a young man had stopped by the house that looked so much like their son it was uncanny. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, he said. Those exact words. And it sent chills down my spine because obviously I'd seen one only an hour before meeting his wife, in case you haven't figured that out yet. So I wanted to come meet you, and well, she was right. You look just like him. The couple had had only one child, a son. He would have been old enough to be my father if he were still alive, as he had been part of the baby boomer generation. He had gone off to college in the southern part of the state, a different college than the one in the neighboring town where I worked, and while on the way home one weekend during his second semester at school, he'd driven his car off a bridge during a rainstorm and he had been killed. The old man would die within months of the passing of his wife, and this couple and the experience I had with them has never left me. Not just because in time they'd invest more than $500,000 of their green banana money with me, but because of the other experiences, old Harvey and my uncanny resemblance to their son. I've heard it said we've walked this world before and we'll walk it many times more. I just can't help but wonder how much that might be true. The end. First story from October Nights, available in print or Kindle on Amazon. The link to all my books is in the description box below. Times are tough. I hope you're making it through COVID. I hope you're safe. I hope you're healthy. And if you don't have any extra money to buy my books, you come around here every evening throughout the month of October, and as many stories as I can, as many stories that are appropriate to be read here on YouTube, on this social media platform, I will read to you for free. I appreciate every single one of you who take the time, again, to watch my videos, get the books. You have value to me. You mean something to me. You matter. Make sure to check in again tomorrow for more October Nights.